Before we go, can you tell us your name and your job title so we can put it in the third?
I'm Michael Ault. I'm the audio director here at Psyonix.
Awesome. So, when did you join Psyonix?
5.5 years ago, I joined for the project Nosgoth, and we worked on that for 4 years, and we started Rocket League. I started on Rocket League probably about 2.5 to 3 years ago, just doing the prototype sounds, and then just kept going.
Had you worked on a video game before you'd come to Psyonix?
Yes. The game immediately before Psyonix was Hunted the Demon's Forge. It's a dungeon crawler from inXile in Newport Beach. It had mixed reviews, mixed reception, but I definitely learned a lot on that project.
People like the audio?
Yeah, no, the audio was great. Like I was working directly under Jamie Scott, who did the sound for Gears of War, and I learned a tremendous amount from him during that project.
Before we get too deep into this,
yeah.
It's just since we're starting and it's such an easy
No
fix.
worries.
Can I have you on this side instead?
Over here?
I think it'll look better.
Yeah, I'm gonna look in this way.
Yes.
So I'm just looking at you the whole time.
Totally. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right.
All right, cool. You don't have to do your name and title again,
But you're not on your knees anymore. Is that a problem?
Oh yeah. Well, you.
Can you tell me about your sort of work before the world of video games? You worked at, was it Westlake Recording Studio?
Yes, which is Michael Jackson's recording studio up in Hollywood. I started there as an intern in 2007 and progressed through assistant engineer and engineered some gigs there and got to work with a lot of very large artists, to which I kind of discovered I didn't want to do music. I'm much more technical minded, and I kept venturing further and further into that world, and before I knew it, I had transitioned to film, and then from there I eventually transitioned into games and kind of just kept going.
What was the film stuff like?
So I worked at Dane Tracks, which is a post house owned by Dane Davis. He did the sound for the Matrix movies. That's like one of his claims to fame. And it was fascinating. I never got too deep into it. I got to do some cool ADR sessions at Warner Brothers for movies like The Losers or Cabin in the Woods, but very quickly transitioned into games from film.
What was it about the film that sort of didn't, light your creativity on fire?
It wasn't so much that it didn't light my creativity on fire, as at the same time that I was doing internships for Dane Tracks, I was also interning for Jamie Scott, and he offered me a full-time job in games as a technical sound designer. So like actually getting a chance to get in the engine and implement sound, and like as I started learning more and more about that process, it was definitely very different than anything else that I had learned. Everything else in music and film is very kind of decided already. You just kind of redo the same thing a lot of ways. Like it's very artistic and very creative, but with games, you get a chance every single time to like invent a new solution from scratch. And it's fun because it's very collaborative and you work with a lot of people from a lot of disciplines to get to that end result. So I guess the overall process is what was most exciting.
So I'm being led to believe that you basically do all the sound here.
I do. Some of the music for Rocket League has been new artists that we found. For either the video editor has found them or I found them, and we'll reach out and I'll talk to them about licensing that music. But the majority of the sound in Rocket League was handled by me.
So including the effects within the game, not just the music, the actual just sound effects.
Oh, yes,
and everything.
all the sound effects.
Must be a bit of a rough turn going from Nosgoth to Rocket League. They're not exactly like in the same...
Oh, no.
Audio.
That was fantastic. That's definitely very welcome because, like I said earlier, before Nosgoth was Hunted the Demon's Forge, so I had spent like a solid 6 years in a medieval, gory type setting. So, like cars and boosts and like mechanical sounds was a welcome change.
So like audio, it's that old thing where like it's the thing that people don't realize impacts so much on their experience. I guess probably when it's done right. Can you speak to like some of the effects and like the things that you've implemented in Rocket League, which sort of adds to the frenetic sort of punchy feeling of that game that maybe people don't sort of pick up on, they don't realize it's happening?
So the core loop of the game is things like boosts, jumps, and goal explosions and crowd noise. Those are the things that people mostly pick up on, but what they don't realize necessarily that adds a lot of texture to the sonic landscape would be things like the wheels rolling on different materials, or when the car's going through the air, it actually plays different kinds of wind noise depending on the pitch, yaw, and roll. Right. The crowd is actually fully interactive. We're intending to expand upon that over time, but they'll react dependent on the scenario, depending on the stat event, depending on who has the ball and who's scoring and all that stuff. So a lot of that stuff, it's been a long time to try to like integrate things that more single-player games try to do, where you can't necessarily get away with it in multiplayer easily because you can't control the entire experience, right. Especially not in a physics-based game, where pretty much anything can happen, and that's part of the fun in the game, but that's also part of the challenge in making it not repetitive, is figuring out how to balance that.
When they added in like the ability to customize, for instance, the trails, like you could have easily done that and not had different audio with each one of those trails. What was it like, for instance, like working on that? Like how, like in my head, I can still hear that bloody Christmas one going ho 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 over and over again.
So the thing about the trails was that it started with just the standard boost, and there was a lot of iteration time on that standard boost to get that right. And then we just added, like a few more boosts, and then, our effects artist Morgan added a few more boosts, and then a few more boosts. And like each one was very visually different, and I would struggle to reuse sounds when I'm like, visually it looks different, so it kind of cheapens it if it doesn't sound different. So it just kept going, and now that's just a staple of the game, is every boost has a unique sound identifier to it. And some people love some people hate some. That's part of the fun, in my personal opinion, is like, oh, I hate that one. Oh, I love that. I love how that sounds. Like it's people pick boosts for different reasons, and I'm glad that the sound gets to be like a deciding factor for some of that.
Was there anyone that was particularly difficult? Like, was there any like Foley happening with like any of these, or how do you source noises? Like, for instance, like the cash one, right? Or like just coins like hitting off each other.
Some of that's just like paper Foley, coin Foley. Some of the boosts and some of the assets are built from sound libraries. Like, I'm really big into independent sound libraries, like supporting the smaller sound guys out there that are like, oh, it would be cool to have a library of these sounds. And I'll go into the boost and be like, oh, I could use a whole bunch of branch sounds. So I'll go find a library that someone recorded of all that, and I'll buy it from them and use those assets. If I have time, I obviously would prefer to record my own stuff, but that's not always the case in a live product cycle. It just really depends on the given asset.
Was there any sound, be it a trail or something else in the game, that was like particularly difficult or divisive maybe here, that like it was kind of hard to rein in, that like we sort of have all the time?
The car engines.
Really?
Yes, there's a lot of thought that went into the original car engines. There's 4 original car engines for the game that were used for a lot of the vehicles up until, I believe, the first vehicle to use a different car engine was the Back to the Future vehicle.
Right.
And the reason for that was we iterated on how they should sound. Should they sound exciting? Should they be like very downplayed? And a lot of it came back to, it's not really an important part of the game, ironically. The game's about soccer, and it's about cars jumping and boosting and all those things. It's not really about the fact that they're cars. The engine sound itself is infinitely shifting. It never stops because the cars actually reach their maximum velocity fairly quick.
Right.
So if you were to have a sound that matches that, it would be very boring.
Yes.
Which is also why we downplay it with the choices. More recently, in more recent patches, we've explored how the community reacts to different concepts, because we definitely felt like this is an area where we could do something cooler. And again, like it's kind of like the boost. Some people love some people hate some. We're trying to like learn from that every patch and apply it to the next patch. Like, okay, what did they like about this? What did they not like about this? How can we make another engine that hits the mark, that's exciting?
But none of the cars have like 7 million gears.
Yeah.
They just keep going.
It just keeps going.
How did you record the, I guess the stadium, the crowd stuff? Because a lot of it like sounds like I grew up in Ireland and watched Premier League, and a lot of it sounds like chants that I'm like familiar with.
So a lot of the chants are sourced from various sound libraries or things like Pond5, where you can go out there and like search through and like find unique assets. The thing about crowd sound is it's not exactly like an easy asset to go record.
Right.
Then we stacked on a lot of people in the office doing things.
Okay.
You can actually hear those assets exclusively in like the park. That's literally just everyone in the office, which is kind of entertaining because there's certain voices that like are very identifiable because I hear them every day. So like when I play like park, I'm like, I can hear you in there. So.
Is there any? What's your like? I guess this is a super bland question, but it sometimes brings up interesting answers. What's your favorite sound effect in the game? What's like the one you're like most proud of that you feel like you sort of like nailed?
I think the jumping sounds are super on point. They never get old when I hear them. Like I think they sell the excitement of it. They give you a very visceral feeling. And I think hitting all those marks at the same time is very challenging. I also think the goal explosion was a very successful win for the game. Like it's a very iconic part of the core loop. Like it's exciting when it happens. The horn sells it more. Like just everything about that sequence was very well done, very well executed. Those are some of the ones that I'm most proud of in the game.
Yeah, when the goal happens, it almost feels like it's sort of like it sucks itself in and then explodes with like the klaxon sort of. It's almost like an ice hockey kind of sound as well. Where did that come from? That idea of having the almost like this black hole sort of moment where then it explodes.
If it's just like a standard explosion, it doesn't really feel big because you just kind of hear that all the time. So like the concept of something so loud that it like sucks into itself, like black hole type sensation, it gives it this enormous sense of weight to it that you can't necessarily achieve otherwise. So that was kind of like the focal point for that.
One of the things that the community has really latched onto since day one on Rocket League is the soundtrack. Can you talk to like how you sort of got your music in the game and how you got Hollywood Principal's music in the game? Because I actually had no idea that that is your band, like that is a collaboration that sort of you've done. So how did that happen? In my head, I imagine people just go, oh shit, we need menu music, somebody come up with some, and it just so happens you have all this rad dance music you've been working on. How did it happen?
So originally that was never the intent. We went through a lot of different iterations on what the menu music should be. Everything from like very ESPN Sports Center-y type thing to Monday Night Football to like very throwbacky, fun, playful Nintendo 64 type music. And each one of them would be in there for 5-6 months. And eventually someone in the office would be like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling that. That like gets pretty old. And it really came down to a point where I just took a whole bunch of music, like my music, some of the other people in the office, like they have bands and stuff, and just threw it all on the main menu and just let it sit and just see what people said after a while. The stuff that stuck was just all of my personal music. And it's actually kind of funny because you'll read comments. It's like, oh, this song sounds like it was, came out of 2009. It's like, well, I wrote that in 2009, so you're not wrong. So it's literally just a combination of music that I've been writing over the years. It's just personal music. It was never really intended for that kind of purpose. It's just what happened to fit the vibe of the game and fit it well, and it just ended up being a thing that it kind of embodied the spirit of the game, like fun, bouncy EDM.
Yeah, why do you think it is? Because on paper, I mean, playing soccer with cars and then you add dance music, it doesn't necessarily sound like it should work, but it's so fundamental to the feeling of Rocket League. So why do you think it does work so well?
I think part of it just kind of like struck a tone with the fact that a lot of the gamer community is into electronic music, and most of those songs are very accessible. They're not necessarily new or like the original soundtrack. They're not necessarily new or cutting edge, but they're like a very familiar, welcoming sound, and none of them are intense or kind of like bombard you.
Right.
Which is something that we've strived since, like by adding music to the game. It's like, how far can we push this? Like, how can we get something new, but like still stay true to the core of what people want to feel when they boot up the game. It just kind of, it was like a happy coincidence. It just worked perfectly.
Talk about actually people booting up the game, because that even seems very intentional. The sort of the Psyonix logo comes up, and then the music. I mean, obviously the track has changed a lot over each patch, but you know, when the sort of drop happens almost when the car appears on the screen, and it's quite a moment. Like it's the type of moment that you wouldn't get if you just had like Sports Center horns going off or something. It feels like calculated in a way. Was that intentional?
It was very intentional. When we put the first original Rocket League theme in. I wrote it with a small build in the beginning, and then worked with Atkins, our UI artist, to time out those cards so that if you don't actually interrupt them, it would literally time out perfectly.
Right.
So from there, when we changed it out to the very next song, which was Firework, we were writing that song at the same time that we decided that we were going to go and start putting new music in with every DLC. So it's like, well, the beginning of the song has to be this long. It's just how it has to be.
Right.
So since then, every song, if it doesn't have that appropriate length, it'll be doctored to fit that.
Right.
So like the Breathing Underwater Ether remix, which is a very popular song in the game, is a lot shorter in the main menu than it is if you go and find it online. It's like a good minute and a half, 2 minutes longer online, because we cut it down. It's like, this is the part that's exciting. This is the part people need to feel. So,
tell us what Hollywood Principal is then. Like, who is it a collaboration with?
Hollywood Principal is a collaboration of me, Elliot Senkin, and Kayla Hope. They are both like very talented musicians I met in San Diego, and I had already been doing my solo stuff, and they had both been doing solo stuff. And I found Elliot first. Actually, he found me through a mutual friend, and we started working on music together and kind of formed Hollywood Principal from that. We had been releasing tunes for about a year and a half, and when we decided to put Firework in the game, that was actually a new song that we had just started kind of like putting together. And I was talking to Jeremy, the head of marketing, about like, I want to change out the song with the DLC because I want it to be in the trailer, and I want it to like kind of like embody the whole experience. So when you start up the game at that point, it would give you the feeling that the trailer gave you, hopefully. It would make you excited about the fact that, hey, there's all this new content in the game. So it was kind of like how that all fell together. And the added benefit of it was I wanted to like push away from like everything being Mike Ault on the soundtrack. The key reason for that was one of the cool benefits of having licensed music per se, like music that didn't feel like it was written for the game. It just works really well in the game, as you get that kind of larger than life sports game feeling where it's like, these are really popular songs, and you know, we have them in our main menu, like you'd get from like any giant EA title basically.
Yeah, so in a weird way you became sort of like a cultivator of music then from within, I guess, the North American sort of EDM scene, I guess. Is that kind of what's happened? Like, talk about some of the other people you've brought in.
So after that, like, I realized the positive reaction of Firework, and it was very exciting for people to like hear new music in the game. It's like, oh, I can't believe you changed it. That's like so exciting. That's so different. And we kind of, I started to realize the potential of what that could do for indie artists in general, because I saw like what it was doing for my songs that had already been released before. It's like, oh, all of a sudden these are very interesting to people because they're hearing them all the time. I'm like, this is a cool avenue. This is something I should explore. So we kind of like inched our way into that slowly, because it's really hard to like go to a giant artist and be like, here, just put your music in the game. It'd be great publicity. And so we experimented with remixes first. So we took some of the songs that were already present in the game, or like Hollywood Principal songs, and found artists that, like, we used indibamusic.com, which is basically a remix competition site, and approached them and said, hey, we want to host a remix competition, like, so our fans can submit, which is actually how the Kevin Frey piece was found. So Seeing What's Next was on the original soundtrack, just in rotation, and he made the remix that eventually released with Neo Tokyo. He actually made that in October, and we held off on releasing it because we wanted to pair it with that exact release because it just felt right. And so from there, we approached the Fat Rat about, like, he was our first big artist that was not a direct association to Hollywood Principal or Mike Ault in some way, and basically approached him with the same thing. It's like, hey, here's this opportunity. Really really love your music. We'd love to put it in the game. We'd love to explore this with you. And he was super on board with it, super excited, and that ended up being the Rumble Mode music, and that was also very exciting. And then this last artist was actually a complete indie. So I wanted to explore the concept of pushing someone that hasn't been exposed yet. And his numbers were all like reasonably small indie artists, EDM, like, you know, his music was fantastic. And his friend had reached out to me on Reddit and said, hey, I know that you do all the music in Rocket League. You should listen to my friend. And I will always listen to that. Like, anytime anyone sends me that, I will always like listen to it because I'm like, oh, I'm curious. And it was that song, and I was like, this is fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. So I reached out to him, and, you know, I proposed him, like, hey, I'd like to help you release this song along with Rocket League. Like, I think it would be very beneficial. I think we can do a lot.
Did he play Rocket League or no Rocket League?
His friend was a huge Rocket League player. I actually don't know if he is. I never asked. I know he's super excited about the whole premise, so he probably is at this point, if he wasn't before. And it's done exceptionally well, and it's a fantastic song. He's very, like, the credit is definitely due for him, so.
Like, I used to work in radio in a different lifetime, and the biggest problem forever with good music was getting people to listen to it, and distribution was super hard. And it seems, I mean, apps have helped, but like radio was just a great way of like forcing music on people that they might like. What was it like for you, who had made all this music that was clearly like people liked it when they heard it, having like this extra audience just suddenly be exposed to it? Was that sort of strange for you?
That's very weird.
Yeah, like, especially because they were older songs, a lot of them as well.
Yeah, it is very weird because a lot of those songs stem back really far in time for me. So a lot of them were written off as just, you know, like, oh, it's just a song that I did at that point in time in my life. And it's weird to see mixed reactions. I mean, you obviously have people on the internet that hate them because that's, you know, it's the internet. It's true. And then you have people like, oh, I've gotten a message. I remember one in specific, a guy reached out to me on SoundCloud and said, hey, you know, like, your song Flying Forever. I'm going through a breakup, and I was playing Rocket League, and I started paying attention to the words, and it's like, this song has helped me through this breakup, and that's very, like, impactful. I just want to say thank you for writing this. And I was like, wow, that's really weird too. I'd never thought I would experience that from music I placed in a video game, like, that I wrote, you know, 6 years prior. It was just like, wow, okay, that's really cool.
What do your collaborators think?
They're all stoked. Every last one of them is super happy to be part of the project, super happy that, like, I'm assuming you're referring to, like, Aviana and Krista and everyone that's done a song with me on the album.
And also your Hollywood Principal.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's super stoked to be part of it, to get a chance to, like, be heard. As artists, it's very rare that you get that opportunity, which is one of the reasons I want to expand it so much to other indie artists, is because it's a cool opportunity, and the Rocket League community is very receptive to new music. So it's fun to see, and it's fun that my collaborators, who are also my friends, you know, are getting a chance to be heard.
And what about Hollywood Principal? Has it sort of changed things for you, because you have, like, more people who are fans, presumably, of your music than you would have had prior to this? Like, when you do live events, like, whenever you get the chance to do them, do you ever, like, run into people who, like, know your songs through the video game?
Yes. It's weird. It's definitely not what I expected. I'm amazed that we pulled off what we did as well as we did, which is, like, separating the Hollywood Principal entity from Mike Ault, so it, like, stands on its own, and it looks like, you know, like, oh, Hollywood Principal is an artist that's licensed for the game. I mean, that was obviously the intent, like with how we put it out there in the game, and it worked very well. So it's always interesting when someone puts the two together, because it's like a aha moment. It's like, oh, I understand how this all fits together now.
Yeah.
But it's been great for the band. I don't think any of us expected to like go up quite this fast musically. We've obviously been pushing for 2-3 years, and Rocket League has definitely helped us, and we're very grateful for that opportunity. You know.
And how does it help, like, both you and also other collaborators? Like, obviously it helps exposure because people then know the songs and they can look them up and YouTube them and whatnot. But like, how does it help sort of in terms of like the rubber meeting the road for, like, you know, helping people, you know, Spotify listens can only do so much for you revenue rise, right? Like, what's the sort of the real way it helps people? Does it drive sales? Does it just, is the exposure the most important?
Exposure is probably the biggest thing. Is it becomes an identifier for a DLC pack. So once it's part of the trailer, you kind of like get super stoked on it. Like our video editor's fantastic. He puts together absolutely amazing trailers.
I heard you did his job before he came on.
I did. It got to a point where it's like, all right, there's too many hats. Like, we need someone that does that and probably can do it way better than I can, because I do sound. I do not do video. I mean, I can, but I don't. You know, it's like one of those things.
Yeah. I'm flattered you asked, but no.
Yes. It's like, can't keep doing this. So he has a great ear too. He's a musician also, so like he gets it. He gets, like, you know, how to use the music in a way which is exciting, and then you attach that to the front end of the game, and like you get this just embodied experience, and it's great for the artist because it's like a temporary time period in Rocket League where you get like this identified, like, I remember this.
Yes. Like
you hear the music and you hear it all together, and you're like, yes, this is that. This is cool. This is amazing.
It's incredible that all the people we talked to today, you know, Rocket League's a game that was a decade in the making in many ways, from days back in Epic in North Carolina to Battle Cars to eventually having it launch and be so successful. But in a really strange way, the music in the game is also your legacy going back, as you know, as far.
Yes.
Is that sort of strange in a way that like it's like this focal point of not just all the work you did getting here as an individual, but as a creator, that like you literally music that you made in the past is like getting a new life because of the success of this game?
It's definitely fascinating because I never intended for the Mike Ault music to take off like that. It was like just a personal endeavor that I did on the side, and like my main job has always been sound design. You know, it's always been like sound effects, like creating and crafting the sonic vision for like games or film or whatever the project may be. So it's definitely been a weird twist on the whole Rocket League venture, because that project to me is more about like the whole experience, and I never expected the music to play that big of a role.
You any good at Rocket League? You any good at Rocket League?
No, by comparison to the people in the office, no. I'll play my friends because they're all pretty bad too.
Right.
Like Elliot is absolutely horrible at it. So right. I like playing Elliot.
I think the only tail end question I had left actually about it was, because we mentioned it earlier on, was I mean, the impetus seems to be getting indie artists in. I mean, Deadmau5 has like a topper in it. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing you wouldn't get him in here because he's like too legit. He's like too mainstream.
Not necessarily. Like the focus is new, exciting music, like new, exciting experiences. Obviously, I being an indie artist, like I have a deep love for that possibility, that like avenue. But I mean, we have a lot of things planned for the game, like a lot of exciting things, and I'm trying to match pace with how many features we're adding to the game, like by redoing sounds and making things exciting and trying new things, both musically and sound effect wise. So, but the Deadmau5 topper was something that was done completely outside of the music side of the game for sure.